All right, everybody, welcome to Shed Aquarium's Shed Talks about our Amazon rising habitat. I see we've got lots of people signing in, so we're just going to give it another moment before we start the introductions formally. But it's good to see everybody here on this amazing Friday afternoon. We are coming at you live from Chicago, Illinois, where it is a gorgeous late 70s, high 70s. Uh, and should be around 80 degrees today. It's beautiful blue skies, which is a welcome change of the weather that we had a couple of days ago. But it looks like we've got a good amount of folks logging in already. I do want to give it just one more minute because I know sometimes Zoom has to download updates. People have got to sign in, log in. So this is amazing. But we're just going to give it one more, well, probably about 30 more seconds. At 12:02, we're going to dive on in because we have a lot to talk about, and I am so excited to introduce some of the folks that are going to be sharing this incredible information with you. Because you as members, you are getting a first look at some of these habitats, which is pretty darn special, especially at the end of everybody's week. Once again, if you're just joining us, welcome to our Shed Talk right here live from Shed Aquarium in Chicago, Illinois. We are giving it just another couple of seconds here to let all those folks deal with technology. I know we love technology, it's excellent, but sometimes it does have its hiccups. So we're just going to give it another couple of seconds here. But let's dive in because folks will be able to trickle in and out. So let's go to our next screen right here where we can start the process. Yes, there we go. Welcome to Shed Talks. Everybody, welcome. My name is Brian Sprague. I'm the manager of training and development here at Shed. He, him, thank you. And I've got a couple of announcements I want to make first about how we're going to be interacting and engaging with everybody. So the first feature that I want to introduce to everybody is our chat feature. Now, if you're new to Zoom, whatever you are on, whether it's a computer, a television, a tablet, there should be a little pop-up screen at either the bottom or the very top of your window, and there should be an option that says chat. Pull that up, and I am actually going to type something in the chat to everybody right now. And because we are in a webinar mode, you won't be able to see other people, but we will be able to see and you'll be able to interact with us. Oh, great. I've got so many people jumping in with the hellos in chat. Oh, we've got Amy saying hi. This is amazing. We got Jacob saying hello. Julie saying hello. Yes. Julianne, yes. Greetings. Yes. This is so awesome. So obviously we have found the chat function. This is going to be key. If you have any questions throughout the experience, please, please, please don't hesitate. And we're also going to be asking you questions and engaging with you as well. Now, speaking of questions, we also have a Q&A feature where you can type your question. It will go directly to all the hosts and panelists. And so we'll be able to sort those things behind the scene, get you answers. And then at the end, we're going to have an opportunity to get those questions answered live from our experts. So starting off, though, I mentioned that engagement. So if we go to our next slide, I've got something really fun for all of us to start because we are using a fun new piece of technology, which is called Mentimeter, which is a way for us to engage through a different platform. And so up on your screen right now, you are going to see a couple of different ways that you can access our Menti questions. If you're on desktop and you've got a second screen, don't hesitate to just pull up menti.com, enter that code. If you'd like to just scan that QR code, use your phone. The mobile version is very accessible. And that's my preferred method, to be honest with you. But I also love the hands-on of having it on the desktop. But it looks like we've got some folks already starting to their first guess. And our question is, when did Amazon Rising first open? So once again, you can scan that QR code, or if you've already brought Menti up, you should already have that there, and everybody should be able to see the results. But we're going to get that question answered to us by our experts. And right now, I want to introduce to you just very briefly, because they'll be able to take things away in just a moment. But here is who we have today. over on the far, at least on my screen, it's on the far left side. You see me, I know. My name is Brian. Once again, I'm the manager of training and development for our public engagement team. And today we are joined by two of the top three Sarahs at Shed Aquarium. That's right. We are joined by Sarah Werner, who's our manager of interpretive programs, and Sarah Amen, who is our senior exhibit designer. And both of them work with our design and exhibits team. So without further ado, I would love to take it over to Sarah Amen, who can answer our question, because we have a lot that say 2001. Sarah, are we correct?
You are correct. Amazon Rising first opened in 2001. That's hard to believe. It's over 20 years ago. Definitely time for a refresh, but we're going to get into that in just a second. So wanted to welcome everyone. Thank you, Brian, for introducing us. Like you said, I am Sarah Amen, one of several Sarahs here. We made it easy for you. And my job as the senior exhibit designer is to really bring our stories to life through graphics and exhibits. So I work on pretty much anything to do with the physical guest experience, so the space that you're walking through when you come here to Shed. Anything from typesetting all those graphic panels to picking out paint colors to designing interactive exhibits.
And I'm Sarah Werner, and my role here at Shed is really about storytelling. So I work with our team to craft the messages that you see in all the exhibits and programs. And we're really excited to talk to you today about the renovation of one of Shed's most iconic exhibits and give you a glimpse behind the scenes in advance of the anticipated fall opening. So this gallery will be one of the first to open as part of Shed's ongoing experience evolution. What we show you today is a sneak peek at the journey of Shed Aquarium, really transforming our galleries to be more science-rich, participatory, immersive, and accessible as we prepare for our centennial anniversary in 2030 and the next 100 years of bringing guests eye to eye with aquatic life. So as we established, Amazon Rising first opened in 2001, and it's home to over 9,000 animals across 260 different species of fishes, reptiles, amphibians, birds, and amazing plant life. But as wonderful as this exhibit is, it has been 20 years since it first opened, so it's time to revisit the stories, update conservation messaging, and really bring new life to the gallery. And, a fun thing about this exhibit is how immersive it is. It basically transports visitors to an amazing landscape that completely transforms twice a year. As many of you know, when the Amazon River floods, the waters rise far enough that an area approximately the size of Florida goes underwater for 6 months. And this, of course, has a huge effect on the wildlife that live there. So our main goal for this exhibit is really to highlight the animals who live through this radical transformation, hear their stories, and learn about the types of cool adaptations that they've evolved that help them thrive in this ever-changing environment. And then other messages that will be emphasized throughout are going to focus on the threats that face this amazing landscape and ways that we can all help to protect it. All right, so what does this renovation process look like? There are really two main parts: upgrades to the habitat, which includes new rock work, new viewing windows, and new plantings, and a new approach to the interpretation and design. As members of the design team, Sarah A. and I spend most of our time in the green bubble. But Sarah A. is going to just give you a little sneak peek of some of these habitat changes as well.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing to be here on site and see all of these visions become reality in real time. So right now, it's still kind of a mess. Actually, this is from a couple months ago, so it looks a little better now. But it's amazing that in a matter of months, this is going to turn into this. It's going to be a really spectacular experience. So what you're looking at right now is representing one of the biggest changes that is coming to our Amazon gallery. This river channel exhibit holds many of our larger Amazon animals, including the arapaima, which you see in that rendering there, but also the giant river turtles, the tambaqui, the freshwater stingrays, and I think, Sarah, this is one of both of our favorites, an enormous Jow catfish, which will be on the public side for viewing for the first time. Now, this habitat is going to more than double in size. So originally it was 16,000 gallons, And now it's going to be 45,000 gallons, which gives these river giants a lot more space to swim around. And those arapaima, they're not even full grown yet, so they're going to have a lot of space to grow. Sarah mentioned all the amazing plants in the Amazon, and all of that diverse plant life is going to be able to be captured here in our Amazon exhibit through the lush plantings that we have. So in order to really bring this habitat to life, two of our horticulturists, Julie and Charlotte, actually traveled to South America to research different types of tropical plants and how to care for them here at the aquarium. So they came back with some really awesome ideas on how to create a truly immersive environment that helps transport visitors to the Amazon River Basin. You know, through this process and this trip to South America, you know, they said that it really helps them understand the growing needs and the habits of these tropical plants. So additions to this gallery include hundreds of new bromeliads, a large philodendron, which you can see in the lower left-hand corner, who is aptly named Phil, which is also the name of the person that they purchased it from. So it's kind of a nice little homage. And there's going to be many numerous ferns, vines, flowering plants, all kinds of things that you might find in or near the Amazon River Basin. So as of the reopening, they're going to have planted over 500 new live plants throughout this space, in this River Giants exhibit and in other exhibits in Amazon Rising. So you may recall our old Amazon Rising space. We also have some new exhibits that are going to be renovated that include some of our smaller Amazon friends, such as frogs and snakes. We are removing all of these static graphics that are along the left-hand side, which felt a little outdated and not as interactive, and we're going to replace them with more animal habitats, highlighting frog biodiversity, snakes, turtles, and other reptiles and amphibians. So you can see this space under construction here. And right next door, we took some unused real estate or underused real estate, which was previously a small retail space, and we're repurposing it into new exhibits that focus on the pet trade, which is what you're looking at now, and ecotourism. And I'm kind of teasing you with these construction photos, but I'm going to turn it over to Sarah W., who's going to tell you more about the interpretive approach to this space. And she will also have a sneak peek of what these spaces are going to look like when they're done.
Thanks. So overhauling all of our interpretation has been a huge undertaking. We've produced over 70 new graphics for this space, and one immediately apparent upgrade is including bilingual content. One of the primary goals for this new exhibit was to make it as fully accessible as possible for as many people as possible. And throughout this talk, we'll identify a few of the ways we're trying to achieve that. But the first is that all of the graphics are going to be fully bilingual in both English and Spanish. And we're actually going to be doing this for all Shed exhibits moving forward. So that's really exciting. But the other major interpretive shift is really towards more animal-focused stories. Our original previous messaging focused a lot on the different types of habitats within the Amazon River Basin. But for this renovation, we're really moving towards more animal forward content. What is it about these animals that is, so compelling? So this is a visual of two of the graphic panels, one focused on jacanas, that's the one on the right, and one focused on catfish on the left. And for each, we've tried to pick a story that speaks to how these animals have adapted to this environment, this changing environment that we talked about. So for instance, jacana fathers protect their offspring from lurking aquatic predators by tucking the chicks up under his wing and carrying them to safety, which creates this kind of crazy visual of a bird that looks like it has 10 legs, but those are the chicks under its wings with their legs hanging down. While catfish actually dig burrows in the mud bank to hang out in. So we hope that by sort of focusing content on specific behaviors of these animals, we can really help guests connect with them. And then another shift in content is going to be to really increase focus on the biodiversity of the region and threats to that biodiversity. Which leads us to our second question, our second mentee question.
Yes. So once again, everybody, I have moved on to our second question. So if you scan that QR code, you should be able to find that second question, which is how many of the world's known animal and plant species live in the Amazon? Is it 45%, 2%, 18%, 33%? And it looks like we've got several folks who've already starting to guess, and it's fluctuating now between 45% and 33%, which are both very high, I'd think, but also probably kind of accurate, and we'll know here in a second. We'll just give it another minute so everybody has an opportunity to take their best guess at how many of the world's known animal and plant species are found in the Amazon. And it might be surprising to some folks, although it looks like the majority are still sitting in around 45% and 33%. It looks like we're almost tied between 45 and 33%. We'll give it just another few seconds here to see if we can't get it tied, which would be awesome. But all right, we'll close it here and we'll have the Sarahs reveal the answer in 3, 2, 1. And what's the answer?
So it is about 33%. It's about a third of
Wow.
of the world's biodiversity exists in this region. You can kind of see on that graphic on the left where you can see the dark red. That's the Amazon River Basin, and that's kind of crazy, right? That so much of the Earth's biodiversity is concentrated in this place. And because of this, it's really important that we share with guests how critical it is to protect it. Because even though it seems like the Amazon is really far away from us here in the United States and, therefore of little consequence, we're actually very connected to this place. So we're going to be surfacing some really important conservation topics for the first time in this gallery. And this is a really big part of, sort of the big thematic change in our experience evolution, which is activating guests more directly as it pertains to conservation. And because the animals in this gallery are perfect ambassadors for this content, this is an ideal opportunity to educate guests about their role in protecting wildlife through the decisions they make about travel and pet ownership. So this is the pet store exhibit we alluded to before. A lot of the big issues sort of facing us as a society these days, like climate change and deforestation and habitat fragmentation, feel really hard to tackle as individuals, right? Like you feel like there's not much that you can do. But the removal of animals from the wild for the pet trade is actually a huge problem. And it can be a concrete conservation action that shed visitors, well, really all of us can take. So on the right, you'll see this is a look at the new pet shop graphics that talk about how wild populations of animals like turtles, birds, and fish, especially in the Amazon, have been highly impacted by the pet trade, much of it here in the United States. Amazonian fishes like bettas and tetras are really popular with hobby aquarists. So the idea behind this exhibit is sort of to get people to think critically when choosing a pet, and to ask questions. Has this animal possibly been taken from the wild? Are wild populations of that species stable, or are they threatened? Just getting people to sort of think critically about an issue that you might not have considered before. And this is actually sort of a challenging and nuanced topic, but we're not going to shy away from it. And we're curious as to how guests are going to respond to this type of content, honestly. We're also going to have facilitated programs on this topic in this pet store area that will allow for and, indeed encourage thoughtful conversation around this issue. And then the other piece of this conservation story is about ecotourism. So, seeing wild animals is often the reason we plan trips to places like the Amazon. But sometimes our desire to get closer to animals, whether because we want to feed them or take selfies with them, or just to get close to them because they're amazing, can lead to harm for them. So this is a suite of activity that shows sort of how, when we encounter animals in the wild, whether at home or in exotic locales, we can make choices that are healthier for them and safer for us. So those dark green movable panels that you can see there on the left, those are all interactive. They'll have questions that on the front of those that sort of speak to these issues. Things like, what kind of souvenirs should I buy, or is it okay to take a selfie with this animal? And then by both raising and lowering the panel, content will be revealed that informs those questions.
So as you can probably tell, there are so many amazing stories to tell our visitors about the Amazon and the animals that live there. So how do we tell them? I'm going to get a little bit into the design process and kind of get a peek behind the curtain of how we put together an exhibit like this. So we only have a few seconds to grab someone's attention, and really just a few seconds more to actually tell our story. In this kind of environment, really limited or divided attention is a given. And, there's some guests who might not want to or even be able to read for whatever reason. So it's a constant balancing act as we're trying to weigh what we think is important for our visitors to know, and what our guests actually want to know and what they have time to look at, because no one's going to want to read a novel on the wall when they're here to see the animals. So, and it's also really difficult to tell certain stories about these incredible animals, only through photos, because when we're talking about animals that live in murky, muddy waters, there's just not always a ton of really good photography out there for us to use in our graphics. So we had to kind of come up with maybe a different approach that's kind of new for Shed. And this is storytelling through illustration. So we partnered with a very talented illustrator. His name is Chris Barella, to help us show, not just tell our stories. So on the screen, you can see a time lapse of him digitally illustrating a Amazon giant river turtle. Now, when some people hear illustration, they might, like think children's books or, it's for kids. But, illustration has really played a huge role in the world of science to communicate concepts when photography, just doesn't cut it, or even, before photography was invented. An illustration, it doesn't have to be childish. It can be really sophisticated and I think it appeals across generations. So we're really excited about this approach because this visual storytelling helps us better communicate our message to including non-readers. So let's take a look at how this process works. So we always start with a story. That's the key ingredient here. What is the most compelling thing that will pique our visitors' interest and help them connect with this animal? So I'm going to walk you through this example. This is an anaconda, and you may not have known this, but anacondas actually have a sixth sense. It's called thermal sensing, and it actually helps an anaconda, kind of get heat signatures from its surroundings, like a piece of prey, like a capybara browsing on the bank, or maybe a warm rock that it can bask on. So Sarah, as our manager of interpretive programs, writes a lot of our interpretive content for us. And so once she has the story drafted, I produce a quick sketch that we can share with our illustrator. So then he takes it, makes it way better, starts working on composition and color. And this is really a back and forth process as we try to hone in on the visuals that are going to tell this story the best. And the end result is a beautiful illustration that conveys our message. And when you pair that with the written text, you really get a sense of the story and the message that we're trying to communicate. So you can see here, we've got the thermal image of the capybara. We've got a gorgeous illustration of the anaconda. And Chris is just amazing at really bringing these stories to life. And we have a lot of stories like this in our new gallery. Many of them are about really cool, unique adaptations like this. We talk about some conservation success stories, and we even have one graphic panel about poop. So humor, I think, can be a great entry point to talk more about complex topics. In this case, we wanted to highlight the important role that red-footed tortoises play in reseeding the Amazon forest ecosystem. And we thought a fun way to talk about that subject would be to lead with what's left behind. So Chris really did an incredible job making this vibrant scene where you can really get an idea of the story just by looking at the graphics before you even read the content. And that makes these more accessible to various ages and different language speakers. And it also just, is a beautiful addition to our graphics. So illustration is one way that we sought to increase engagement and accessibility and tell our story more effectively, but that is not the only tool in our storytelling toolbox. We know that physical engagement through different senses, whether that's touch, hearing, smell, that would equal an increase in learning and engagement with visitors when we can activate those senses. So we wanted to activate multiple senses within our interpretives, including visual engagement, of course, through illustration and lighting effects and media, physical engagement with interactive sliding panels and tactile models, audio engagement with new soundscapes that will really kind of give you a listen to what the Amazon rainforest might sound like, and even olfactory engagement, which might be my favorite, which we have a scent box that will give visitors a whiff of lovely rotting fruit that a tambaqui might eat. And I want to talk more about the tactile models because I think this process is really amazing. Not only are they a great engagement tool, they're also really a key accessibility feature. This allows visitors with different visual abilities to, literally use their hands to get a feel for what this animal might look like. So our exhibit fabrication team right here in-house has been very hard at work creating these highly detailed animal models that represent several species that you would find living here at our Amazon gallery. And I gotta say, it is quite the process. The fact that we have this kind of talent and the facilities right in-house to create our own models is kind of amazing. I don't think that there's many other aquariums who have that capacity. And so in this video, you can see Claire, who is painting our red-footed tortoise model and really bringing that to life. So we also have an added bonus, and that is that we are neighbors with the Field Museum. So as part of this process of making these models, we actually went over to the Field Museum, who has a massive collection of preserved specimens. And our team was able to access those and even borrow some of them to help with that model making process. So between the preserved specimens at Field and of course, the living animals that we have here and all the experts that we have right here on site, and then, a little help from that little thing called the internet, our team really had a treasure trove of resource material to work from and reference while they were sculpting. And that allowed them to make these just incredible models that you'll see here. And this attention to detail really shows. I'll give you an example to prove the point. Someone on our team, Tim, was walking down the hallway carrying the tortoise model upside down, just casually, as you would. And someone on the animal care team turns the corner and has a heart attack because they think that he is absconding with a red-footed tortoise. So that just proves to you how realistic these models are. You can see the model on the left-hand side and the real tortoise on the right. And yes, this attention to detail even extends to poop. I think only at a place like this do you have someone whose part of their job is to keep a piece of tortoise poop in the freezer next to everybody's lunches for sculpting reference. Our jobs just get really weird sometimes, but you know what? It keeps things interesting, right? All right, so let me give you an overview of what this model making process looks like. So it starts with the base carving. Generally our team is going to start with like a styrofoam base to get the general size and shape of the animal. I didn't have a photo of that part of the process, but you can see Claire here when she cuts off the leg to re-sculpt it. You can see a little peek of that styrofoam base in there. So after the base is done, a layer of clay is added and details are meticulously sculpted. And they might be embossed, they might be hand sculpted, or even cast. So you see the white parts on that model are actually castings from a caiman skin that we borrowed from the Field Museum. So we were able to make this really realistic and then seamlessly blend it in with the rest of the sculpture. So the next step is casting. So once the clay sculpture is done, it's sealed and then cast in resin. And this process is a little bit scary because it requires the destruction of the original sculpture, which you can see in that inset. I feel so sorry for Claire that she had to go through that, but it's a really important step because the resin is way more durable than the original clay sculpture, and we can cast multiples from one mold, which is awesome. Now, the last step is to bring it to life. Claire is our painter extraordinaire, and she does an amazing job making these models look alive through a combination of airbrushing and hand painting. And so the final result is a final product that is not only beautiful to look at, but they're just a really great tool for visitors with vision impairments to help them understand what these animals look like. But, it's more than just that, because honestly, who doesn't love a good model? I know I do. This tactile stuff is really engaging for visitors across ages, across abilities. This is part of our show, don't tell approach. You can read about the rough texture of a caiman crocodile skin, or, how sharp a piranha's teeth feel, but it's way better to actually feel it for yourself. Now, these models are one form of interactivity, but we have many other interactive moments in our exhibits. So when we design for interactivity, it's really important to put your ideas to the test. We don't want to make something in a vacuum and then install it on the floor and then find out that visitors just don't get it. They're not interested, or they don't understand it, or they don't know how to use it. We really want to avoid that. So a key step in the exhibit design process is called prototyping. So prototyping always starts with a question, usually more than one. And for Amazon Rising, our prototyping revolved around the following. So functionality, does it work the way that we want it to? Messaging, do people understand what we're trying to communicate? Engagement, is it fun? Is it interesting? Those are important things too. And then of course, accessibility. Are people with varying abilities able to use this piece the way that we intended? So we'll do another little case study here. One of the exhibits that I am most excited about is the electric eels. So not only are our eels getting a new exhibit that will be twice as large, we're also getting more interpretive real estate as well. So it's really great to have more space to talk about these amazing animals. There is just so much to unpack about electric eels, but we really have to be able to narrow it down for our visitors and figure out the best way to tell those stories and ways to engage people. So step number one is concepting. And I'll just give you the caveat that this isn't necessarily a linear process. These things overlap and switch around all the time. But, if you had to distill it, I think this is kind of how it goes. So first step is concepting. And we start with questions. What do we know about electric eels? What do our guests want to know? And how might those things manifest into a really cool exhibit? We always start with tons of ideas. Our team brainstorms and sees, what ideas make us want to take them to the next step. What's really engaging? What's really interesting? What's kind of a clever or new or unique approach? And then we evaluate the space and the real estate that we have, and we start working on drafts of the story and the exhibit design. Now, of course, obviously, one of the coolest things about electric eels is that they produce electricity. So for this exhibit, we wanted to take a deep dive into questions that people might have. Why do they produce electricity? How do they produce electricity? What does it feel like? And so we started to unpack all of those things in the next step, which is when we talked to our experts. So we are not electricity experts. We're not eel experts. So it's really important that we talk to people who are before we get too far into this process. And, really, we consult with our experts all along this journey of exhibit design. We're always checking in. We're always looking for feedback. And we have so many incredible people right here at Shed who can work with us and who are animal experts. And so it's really great to have that resource right at our fingertips. So we had, like I said, talking to the animal care team here who works with the eels every day. So naturally, we start there, but we also consulted with one of the world's leading experts on electric eel research, who is Ken Catania from Vanderbilt University. And we learned a lot from him. And we even got a lesson in electricity from our own electrical engineer here at Shed. So that was fun. And we learned so much. And we found that we made some incorrect assumptions about eels, and we had to adjust our design accordingly. For example, we thought that eels produced, like a range of electrical charges that we can measure and interpret for guests, and, measure it in volts or watts, or however we thought that was best to communicate. But we learned that they really only produced two strengths of electrical pulses. So that was low for navigation and high for stunning prey for defense, or stunning prey or defense. These pulses are produced at varying speeds, some kind of slower and some really rapid and fast, depending on the situation. And so that really changed how we were thinking about displaying this information in this exhibit. And we also realized how little we know about electricity. We really had to revisit high school science to learn again about amps and watts and voltage and how those measurements apply to our eels. So we learned a ton, but we knew we had to prioritize it for our visitor. And that's where the next step comes in, which is the design for testing. So once we have an initial design based on all of this research, it's time to put it to the test with our visitors. So we partnered with a local fabricator, Bridgewater Studios, to turn our design into something tangible and functional that visitors can actually interact with. So you can see in this video, sorry if it's a little bit jumpy, we have multiple interactive elements here. We have some media that explores eel behavior and how they use electricity. We have a model that lights up and shows people how much of an eel's body is dedicated to the electrical producing organs. There's a monitor that kind of measures the amount of electricity the eels are producing in their habitat. And then we have some buttons that actually trigger bubbles and rains in the eel habitat. Now, of course, in our prototype, we had a big monitor that stood in for the real habitat. So one important note that I want to make is that, the prototype doesn't have to be super polished. Like, this feels pretty finished. I mean, we still have like graphics taped up, and of course, the graphics and everything are final, and we're still tweaking the content. But it doesn't have to be a highly polished product. We've done everything from like paper mache and graphics taped to foam core, to these more large scale exhibits and prototypes developed with the help of an external fabricator. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to represent the pieces that we're trying to test. All right, so there's one more step, and that is revise. We learned a lot from this prototyping experience about what guests wanted to know, what they understood, what they didn't. And we really do take all of that feedback into consideration as we work toward our final design. And honestly, we made some pretty big changes based on visitor feedback. And I'll give you an example. Our light up eel really confused some visitors into thinking that eels are bioluminescent. So we revised the model to actually have text light up inside when they press the button instead of lighting up the eel like a lightning bug. And we thought that this would actually communicate the message better and not confuse people into thinking eels were bioluminescent. And you'll have to come see us later this year to see how the final exhibit turned out.
I'm going to jump in and talk a little bit more about prototyping, because there's another really critical aspect of that, and that's accessibility testing. Accessibility testing is critical because we want to make this experience, again, I know I've said this before, but as accessible as possible for as many people as possible. So to that end, we actually partnered with a group of user experts to test many of the interactive components that are going into the exhibit for full physical accessibility. Can they be easily accessed by people who use wheelchairs? If someone has limited hand mobility, can they pull or push the levers on the interactive panels that we're designing? And this was a really successful partnership with people that are so excited about this push for accessibility here at Shed. And what's really nice about this particular group is that they really want to continue to work with us on accessibility issues throughout the entire experience evolution. So we've talked a little bit about changes to the built environment and the interpretation designs, and those are key pieces of the puzzle, but it's not the whole thing. So in addition to the physical changes in the exhibit, we are developing a robust suite of facilitated programs, and this is why we think this is important. We know that when visitors to Shed get the chance to connect with Shed staff, there are really so many positive outcomes. We know that visitors love to talk to people who care for the animals, and other Shed staff who guests really see as experts. And the program talks provide guests with just a much richer experience. They help reinforce exhibit engagement outcomes. And there's an increased sense of belonging and inclusion, which is definitely one of the defined outcomes for this renovation. So these programs are being developed specifically to help connect visitors with the animals. They'll include chats with animal care staff, CART programs that explore animal adaptations, special feeding programs, and you'll be able to hear the loud pop of an arapaima as she inhales prey from the surface of the water. As we mentioned before, there'll be deeper dives on how the pet trade affects animals in the wild. And with the electric eel programs, you'll be able to learn more about electric eels than you ever thought you wanted to know. So that is just a sneak peek at what's coming later in the fall. And you've heard a lot today from Sarah and I, but this project is being developed with a large team of incredibly talented people, both here and at Shed, or both here at Shed, as well as many external consultants. So, while we've covered quite a bit here, it really is just a small slice of the experience. And we really hope to see everyone at Shed when we reopen this amazing gallery. The Amazon is an incredible and incredibly important place. And we're excited to be talking about it in a whole new way. So we'll be reaching out to let you know when this re-envisioned exhibit will be opening and to share more when the time comes to see these spaces for the first time.
Yeah, this is a really, really exciting presentation, a really exciting time as Shed Aquarium goes into the next century, really. So all of these changes and all these things that all of you as members get to see a sneak peek of, this is absolutely incredible. So with that being said, I've got another question for all of you before we ask our experts, the Sarahs, about some more, maybe some more in-depth questions about the process, things like that, things to expect in just a minute. But once again, we've got our Menti up and running. You can scan that QR code with your phone and pull it up. And what I want to do right now is I actually want to share my screen so that way we can see this word cloud populate in real time. So here we go. I'm going to share right now. So hopefully you all can see our word cloud populating at the moment. So this is great. So the question is, which animals are you most excited to see? And of course, we've got the biggest one, which is one of my favorites I'm excited to see too, is the arapaima. And of course, we've got anaconda in there as well. Oh, the frogs, yes. The electric eel is also one of my favorites. Early on in the prototyping, I had the privilege of being on the facilitated programs working group with Sarah W. And the electric eel was one of my vignettes. And so I'm glad to see it come to life, which is really, really amazing. And the arapaima, the river giants live, is also something that I've been working with Sarah on. So I'm excited about those two things. But look at that. We've got the catfish coming back. Yes. The pea puffers. I love that. Yes. Some more turtles, the dwarf caimans. Absolutely fantastic stuff. I'm going to let that Menti keep populating because we'll be able to capture this later on. And I know the Sarahs would love to have this word cloud printed out. So please take your time, keep populating with our word cloud here. But I do want to go back to our PowerPoint here because we have questions. Well, I'm sure all of you have some questions for our experts. So there's a couple of different ways that you can ask these questions. Yes, it is also through the Menti, but there is the Q&A feature through Zoom, or you can even just type them into the chat because I know we've had some folks be complimenting everything as we were going on. I didn't want to like break the flow to be like, oh my gosh, Sarah, yes, this is so cool. Everybody loves it. But please, now is your time. Ask the Sarahs, pick their brains. You are the first ones that have access to all of this information. So this is the time to do it. And we'll give all of you a couple of moments here, just a couple of beats to think of some questions. But I have one to start us off here, and this is for both Sarahs. Obviously, this process started years ago, and the conception in your dreams to now being in the physical part of this process, what was the biggest hurdle that you either creatively or logistically had to deal with when it comes to this whole process of working with multiple different partners? What do we think?
Well, I can I can speak to something that I know is a hurdle. It's not necessarily something, thankfully, that Sarah or I had to tackle, but Shed's architecture is so unique and interesting. But the steel beams in that space, trying to create new exhibitry within that very specific existing footprint. I know was really tough, right? Like how do you take that arapaima habitat and increase the volume, um, within the confines of that space. I think that has been one of the toughest. And again, this was not something we had to tackle, thankfully, but how do you work within the confines of the physical space that is shed? I know is something that was really tough.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And Sarah, Abe?
Well, yeah, I'm definitely glad I am not an architect or engineer on this project. It's like open heart surgery trying to renovate a historic building. But from the perspective of our roles, I think honestly, one of the biggest challenges is that there is just so much to talk about. And we want to be really concise with our messaging, like we mentioned in the presentation. You really only get a few seconds to grab people's attention, and they're only gonna like you're lucky if someone spends 10 seconds reading your graphic panel because I mean they're here to see the animals. It makes sense. So one of our biggest challenges that is across all exhibits is just trying to be really concise and really tease out what those most interesting stories are and balance that with the things that we really want to communicate with our visitors, like our conservation messages and our action-oriented messages.
Excellent.
Right. And actually to that end, we do have such limited physical real estate.
Mhm.
And while we are so excited about the introduction of fully bilingual interpretation, all of a sudden you have half as much real estate as you had before because you're telling the story, two different ways. So that was also very, very tricky.
Yeah, well, it seems the dividends have paid off, which is really amazing. Now, we have a bunch of questions that just came in. I'm glad I was able to spark all of that curiosity. Thank you. Yes. No, but Julie would like to know how much of this is actually public knowledge, because I think some of it has been shared, very low level, and just like sort of here's some things for the public, but how much of this is actually like new information for our members?
I
Oh,
think
a lot of
I
it, right?
think some of the I think some of the renderings have been shared out,
Mhm.
but I'm not sure we've shared anything about this process, with the depth that Sarah went into about, model making and prototyping. That's really, I think this is really the first time we're talking about that in any meaningful way. So quite a bit of this is brand new.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
so I want to bring in a question about the pet trade, and this is sort of piggybacking off of each other here. But Tom wants to know, how are we, because obviously we're going to have a facilitated program in that space, how are we going to respond when someone asks where Shed gets our animals if we're looking at this exhibit? And Amber, just the second part of this, Amber just wants to point out that she is a learning professional and appreciates the attention to detail when it comes to all of the accessibility, especially when it comes to these habitats. And the pet trade is going to be a huge habitat, or I should say a huge interpretive area with lots of accessibility. So I wanted to bring Amber's comment into it, but back to Tom's question about the messaging surrounding Shed's animals. What do we think?
Yeah, I think, that's why we wanted to sort of make sure that people understood that this is going to be tricky. It's complicated messaging given who we are and the fact that that we have animals under our care.
Yep.
I think we're going to let the guests lead the conversation. But I think also the animals that are part of the program are going to help speak to that. Shed actually gets a lot of animals from not maybe not a lot, but many of the animals that are at Shed are from pets that have not worked out. They've gotten too big. Part of the conversation that we want to have with guests is before you get an animal, any animal, it doesn't necessarily have to be an exotic pet, but just thinking about, are you prepared? Do you have enough information to make that decision appropriately? I have seen baby arapaima in pet stores.
Wow.
They're about 5 inches long and they're beautiful. And arawana, not sorry, not arapaima, arowana.
Mm.
there's no indication that that animal is going to get to be 5 feet in length. You know, I know that our anaconda, I think was a pet that was abandoned from somebody that, you know, simply couldn't take care of it. So I think we're still working out, you know, answers to the question of where do our animals come from, but having the animals be a part of that storytelling process, I think will really help, because my understanding is that Shed gets a lot of requests of, I can no longer care for this animal. Can you all take it? And of course, we have very limited capacity for, you know, for that type of thing. Yeah, it's going to be tricky messaging. And yeah, that's our curiosity about how visitors are going to respond to that is for that very reason.
And to chime in on that, the animal exhibits that we have in the pet shop area, so mostly freshwater tropicals like tetra, things that are popular in the pet trade. We actually have some interpretations about how those animals were sourced here at Shed. Across the way, we actually have an exhibit about Project Piaba, which is a nonprofit organization that we partner with that is all about trying to make the pet trade, the freshwater fish trade in the Amazon, more sustainable, working with local communities, working with local business people to make that pet trade much more sustainable and safer for the animals. And so that's one of the organizations that we support. And I believe we get some animals from them as well. Although Sarah and I are not the animal experts, so we don't want to speculate.
For sure. And to Sarah's point too, I mean, if you have ever been to Shed Aquarium, it seems, well, you're all members, so of course you have been. But if you look at our largest coral reef, live coral reef habitat, a lot of those were because of illegal trades and customs and stuff like that. So it's an awesome conversation for us to have, I think, especially given where we are in the world now and the fact that we are not shying away from it, but leaning into the challenge of that. That's one of my favorite things about Shed Aquarium, is being able to lean into those conversations, because they are very important, not just for the animals. It's also important for us as shepherds of this planet too, which I really love.
Yeah.
But now let's go more questions. I know we could talk all day. I love having the Sarahs here. But Amber would love to know, as well as I'm sure all of us would like to know internally too. But do you have an anticipated date when these exhibits will open? Because we're trying to plan travel plans. Some of us live a little bit further away. So do you have any tidbits of information for us yet, or no?
I don't think we do.
Okay.
Just because the process of developing an exhibit like this with the hundreds of thousands of moving parts and the fact that it involves live animals.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm not sure we would be able to say with any authority about when
Yeah.
that thing is going to
Keep an
happen.
eye on our website. Keep an eye on
Yep.
social media. Later this year, you're going to be able to see some messaging about that.
Yes, and we'll have in just a moment we'll be able to talk about some more specific dates. But yeah, I mean, with all the moving parts, um, we might have some ideas, but those goalposts move all the time because
Right.
it's construction, for all those reasons that you
Not
said.
something
Yep.
that I want to speculate on.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
All
somebody
right.
else's job.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Another question really quick, because I want to be aware of everybody's time. We've got about 7 minutes left. But is the concept idea for a new gallery crafted before or after the announcement that that exhibit or gallery is being renovated? That's a good question.
Um, you mean, sorry, could you just clarify a little bit what you mean?
Yeah, so before any of these, so we knew that we were going to be renovating Amazon. Were there new gallery ideas being crafted before that announcement, or was it a challenge to you all being like, oh, this is coming down from the top, we need to redo these galleries now, think on it? What's the process there? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Sarah, do you want to?
Yeah, I can chime in on that. So generally, by the time something gets announced, we've already been working on it for a while.
Okay.
So yeah, so whenever, especially with the Centennial Commitment Project, I mean, this has been in the works, years before Sarah and I even started at the aquarium.
Mhm.
And by the time those public announcements are made, we have like the concepts, of those exhibits, but we don't necessarily have them completely fleshed out. And so those public announcements that are like the teasers, we're working to both fulfill the expectations of the public who have been gotten really excited about these announcements that have been made, and also need to remain nimble as issues come up with either the construction or the animals that we have. We have to be able to pivot as well as we are working on these galleries. So I guess the short answer to the question is, yeah, we always have an idea of what we're doing before it's announced to the public. But we have to work to fulfill those expectations too. So
For
And
sure.
it also really varies between types of exhibits. I mean, the Amazon was such a beautiful exhibit. We didn't, we're not going to
Yeah.
start from scratch with an exhibit like that. There were so many things about it that were incredibly successful and beautiful. We're not going to mess with that. We're not going to come in and say, okay, we're going to, we're going to make this a desert, exhibit. So it really depends.
Aquarium.
Yeah.
Sometimes we really will be starting from scratch, and sometimes it's more of an evolution of something existing, and those two things can look very different.
Yeah, and our next question is piggybacking off of this idea of a process, but how do you get into this profession? Our person asking the question wants to get into working in places like zoos and aquariums with animals and habitats, but is unsure where to start. Oh, what about college? What do people need experience-wise?
That's a great question. And the first thing I'll say that this path is not necessarily linear. I think a lot of people in our profession come from a lot of different backgrounds, or they just kind of find themselves, in these environments. But I think one really amazing thing about working in this industry is that you don't have to be someone who specializes in animal care to work at an institution like this. Case in point, none of the three of us work in animal care, but we all get to support that broader mission, and we're here because we love the animals. For me personally, I probably took what is closest to a linear path to get into this job field. I have a BFA in graphic design, and I have a master's in museum exhibition design, which is a very niche degree that does exist, but it's kind of hard to find. And so my career path, went from, volunteering at a local zoo when I was younger, and then starting to do freelance work for them. I worked for an agency for Discovery Channel, and then I worked for a firm that did zoos, aquariums, museums, and like theme parks and stuff, all before coming here to Shed, where now I get to be on site at this amazing institution and supporting that mission every day through the work that I get to do. So that's probably the closest you could get to a linear path, but I'll let Sarah talk because I know she has a really interesting path for how she got here.
I mean, mine was also a long and winding road. My background is marine biology, but I just wanted to reiterate to Sarah's point, there are so many different types of opportunities at an institution like Shed. People have to pay the bills. People have to know how to operate the lights. There's 1,000 different paths to a place like Shed, which is I think really exciting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, I've got a couple more questions, but I also want to be mindful of everybody's time. We've got about 2 minutes until the top of the hour. So please, if you can't stay for the rest of this, I absolutely understand. Everybody's got lives. Ours just happened to be here at the aquarium, which is pretty awesome. But our next question is, when we sent Julie and Charlotte down to the Amazon, they've been to the Amazon before and had a really awesome experience with the native folks in that area. So did you consult or did Julie or Charlotte consult to any of the indigenous folks of that region to get inspiration?
I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Oh, okay.
Sarah, I don't know if you do. I know that they had a guide, and that they went deep into the rainforest. But no, I'm sorry, I don't know too much about that. But we could certainly, if you'd like follow up, I can certainly reach out to Charlotte and or Julie to get more information about their trip and how they went about that, because that's actually a fascinating question. It'd be great to know the answer to.
Yeah.
Well, I can say that in the original Amazon exhibit that opened in 2001, that was heavily, heavily informed by multiple trips down to the Amazon and by actually consulting with locals from that region. That was well before Sarah or my time here at the aquarium, but we've we've gone like looking through the old interpretives and the original concept and plans. There was a very heavy tie-in with the people and culture of that region. In this new iteration of Amazon Rising, we actually decided to take a more animal forward approach, but we did retain some of that information and nods to the people that live in that region as well, who also have to adapt and be flexible to this ever-changing environment. So when you come to our new Amazon gallery, you'll still see the beautiful stilt houses, and then you'll see some new illustrations and graphics that talk about people's relationship to that region as well.
Excellent. All right. So I've got two final questions, but I'm going to wrap them back to back before we talk about some more experiences later on and we hear from one of our auxiliary board members. But the question is, are there going to be any new behind the scenes experience with the Amazon exhibits? And how much did durability of those exhibits play into the designing of those display items? Oh,
Only always.
yes, for sure. Given the
That
amount of
is,
kids we see every year, yeah, in camps and groups, yeah.
oh yeah, that's our mantra when we're designing these is durability, accessibility, maintainability. Those are like,
Yes.
I feel like there's a fourth one. Am I forgetting one? I feel like
Those
those
are
are
the
the
three,
three.
those are the three key ones.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are the things that we're always harping on, both internally and with our fabrication partners, is it's gotta last, we gotta be able to maintain it, and it needs to be accessible. But Sarah, I'll
Excellent.
let you speak to the first part of that question.
About the behind the scenes experiences.
Behind the scenes, actually, Brian, this is actually probably a question for you.
True.
Yeah, at the moment, we are finding ways to include the new Amazon space in that behind the scenes area into our existing must-see tour. We don't have anything concrete just yet, but know that yes, there are future plans to hopefully showcase all of that hard work that has been going on with everybody across the building. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah and Sarah, W and A, and everybody for joining us. I'm going to unspotlight our Sarahs, so if everybody could in the chat or wherever you're at, just give them a nice big round of applause for taking the time and sharing this incredible information. So thank you, Sarahs, and have fun. The rest, you've got a big centennial commitment to design for, so you've got your work cut out for you.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, we will see you next time. All right. So before we say goodbye, before we wrap it up, I've just got a few more things I want to share because we have some really cool things coming down the pipe. So our first one is going to be our next Shed Talk, which is going to be about one of our big main exhibits in the rotunda, which is the Wonder of Water. I know our team has been prototyping and piloting some new interactives and some facilitated programs, which are really going to be pretty exciting. That is going to be Friday, August 23rd. So just over a month from now, 12 p.m. Central Standard Time, just like today. Hopefully, you will not miss out on that one. And then our next one for all of you as members is our next member night, which is going to be Friday, October 11th at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time as well. Now, we also have incredible adventures and opportunities for all of you if you'd like, and if you have the time in your days to join us by exploring the wonders of the Amazon, August 9th through 18th next year, so in 2025. And you can learn more at that website down there. And Havla should have been able to put it in the chat with a direct link. So pull up the chat so that way you can be able to go to that, because I feel like this is an incredible opportunity for you to get insights, not just in our habitat, but just for the amazing Amazon River Basin. And now, to send us off, I would love to introduce one of our incredible auxiliary board members, Andrew Clarkson. So let me spotlight him, and you can take
Thanks.
us away with our thank you.
Thanks, Brian. I'm Andrew Clarkson. I'm a member of the Aquarium Council and the Auxiliary Board here at Shed. Thank you all for joining. It's been so exciting to see how Amazon Rising is being renewed with expanded exhibits and more personal conservation-focused messaging. So I just want to give another special thanks to Sarah A, Sarah W, and the entire team, inside and outside of Shed, working to bring this vision to life. So if you enjoyed this event, make sure to save those dates that Brian just shared. And lastly, as members and supporters of the aquarium, you are an integral driving force behind Shedd's experience evolution. So thank all of you for coming and for lending your support and being that voice for us.
Excellent. And thank you, Andrew. And thank you, everybody else who stuck around. I know we're 5 minutes over time. That is completely my fault, but we were learning and engaging with so much information. It was fantastic. But friends, thank you once again on behalf of Sarah W., Sarah A., and countless others across Shed Aquarium. My name is Brian. Thank you all so much for joining us on the Shed Talks, and thank you all so much for your membership and your continued help with Shed Aquarium as we fill our mission vision through the next 100 years. Have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Please be safe out there and have a wonderful weekend. It's supposed to be nice. Hopefully I can get my lawn mowed and there's no more tornadoes that are going to be coming through. Oh my gosh, what a last couple of days. But friends, thank you all so much and we'll see you next month. All right, everybody. Bye.